For thousands of years, Native American nations thrived across North America with rich cultures, diverse languages, and powerful alliances. But in just a few generations, they faced devastating losses, from land to life to identity. This is the story of how the westward expansion of the United States led to the collapse of Native sovereignty through war, broken treaties, and forced removal. But it's also a story of resistance, survival, and resilience. 1. Native America, before European contact. Before colonization, North America was home to millions of indigenous people across hundreds of nations, like the Cherokee, Lakota, Comanche, Apache, Iroquois, and Pueblo. They had complex political systems, thriving trade networks, and deep connections to the land. Fun fact, the Iroquois Confederacy influenced the formation of the U.S. Constitution. 2. The first waves of conflict. As European settlers arrived, alliances and conflict began. Diseases, displacement, and competition for land began a long cycle of struggle. But the real collapse came with the founding and expansion of the United States. 3. Manifest destiny and the push west. In the 1800s, the U.S. embraced manifest destiny, the belief that Americans were destined to expand coast to coast. This idea justified wars, displacements, and policies that targeted native lands. Between 1800 and 1900, indigenous nations lost over 90% of their land to U.S. expansion. 4. The Trail of Tears and Forced Removal. The Indian Removal Act of 1830, signed by President Andrew Jackson, forced tribes from their homelands in the southeast. Most infamously, the Cherokee Nation was marched westward in the Trail of Tears, during which thousands died of disease and starvation. 5. Broken treaties and government betrayals. Throughout the 19th century, the U.S. signed more than 500 treaties with native nations and broke nearly all of them. These treaties promised land, protection, and resources, but were often ignored when new settlers wanted more territory. 6. The Plains Wars and Armed Resistance. As settlers moved into the Great Plains, native nations fought back. Key battles include Little Bighorn, 1876. Lakota and Cheyenne forces defeated Custer's army. Sand Creek Massacre, 1864. Over 150 Cheyenne and Arapaho civilians were slaughtered. Wounded Knee, 1890. Marked the symbolic end of Native armed resistance. Fun fact, despite being outgunned, Native warriors used brilliant guerrilla tactics and deep knowledge of the terrain. 7. The role of the buffalo. The U.S. government deliberately targeted buffalo herds, a central resource for Plains tribes. From over 30 million buffalo in the early 1800s, only a few hundred remained by the end of the century. This was both ecological destruction and cultural warfare. 8. Boarding schools and cultural erasure. After military conquest came assimilation. Native children were sent to boarding schools where they were forced to cut their hair, abandon their languages, and convert to Christianity. One infamous motto, "Kill the Indian, save the man." 9. Survival and sovereignty. Today, despite centuries of oppression, native nations still endure. Today, there are 574 federally recognized tribes in the U.S., each with its own government, traditions, and land. Movements like Standing Rock and efforts to revitalize native languages show that the spirit of indigenous nations is unbroken. 10. Legacy and reflection. The fall of Native American nations wasn't a single event. It was a long, brutal process, but it also sparked a powerful legacy of survival and cultural revival. To understand American history, we must confront this chapter honestly, because the story of the U.S. is inseparable from the story of its original peoples. The westward expansion of the United States reshaped the continent, but it came at a deep cost. From treaties to trails, battles to schools, the fall of native nations was one of the darkest chapters in U.S. history. And yet, native people are still here, preserving their stories, their languages, and their identities. If this story moved you, subscribe for more deep explorations into the truths behind our history.